The first thing I heard was the metallic click of a lighter opening in the dark. It was such a small sound. Clean, precise, almost delicate. It should not have frightened me more than the armed men on the lower floors, or the heavy doors in the Salvator house that shut like final decisions. But it did. Maybe because everything else in that world announced itself loudly. The lighter didn't need to. I had gone where I was not supposed to go. I knew that before my hand closed around the brass knob on the fourth-floor nursery door. Elena Russo, the head housekeeper, had told me 3 times in 3 different tones that the top corridor stayed locked for a reason. No dust is worth dying for, she'd said, pressing clean sheets into my arms that morning. If a room stays closed in this house, let it stay closed. I should have listened. But the estate had guests coming that night, men in dark suits and polished shoes who smelled like rain, leather, and the kind of money no honest business ever made. The lower rooms had to be perfect. Elena had been called away. A crystal vase shattered in the hallway outside the locked rooms, and because I was the newest and stupidest, I climbed the stairs with broom, cloth, and aching back to clean it before anyone saw. My shoes whispered over marble cold enough to crawl through my soles. The corridor was dim, lit only by the yellow spill of a window at the far end. One door stood ajar. I thought I could slip in, collect the shards, and leave with my heart still inside my chest. I was wrong. I had just bent to pick up the last glittering piece when a voice behind me said, "Explain." Not loud, not angry, worse. I turned too fast. The tray table beside the wall shook. A porcelain teacup tipped, skidding toward the edge. I lunged and caught it with both hands before it broke. That was how he saw me first. Not crying, not screaming. Just a pregnant housemaid in a pale gray dress, crouched in forbidden light, saving a teacup with hands that were already trembling. Dante Salvator stood in the doorway with his lighter open in one hand and the flame burning steady. He was taller than I had prepared for, and calmer than any dangerous man had a right to be. Black coat, black tie, black hair brushed back from a face built of straight lines and withheld decisions. Men downstairs took up space by force. Dante Salvator barely moved at all, and the room belonged to him anyway. Behind him, 2 guards waited. Neither spoke. I set the cup down carefully. "I broke nothing," I said, then hated myself for how small it sounded. His gaze dropped once to my stomach and came back to my face. "No," he said. "You just entered a room no one enters." I swallowed. I was cleaning the glass in the hall, and that required the nursery. I stared at him, so that was what it was, a nursery. The room behind me smelled faintly of cedar and old linen. A white cradle stood near the curtained window, covered with a dust sheet. On the painted wall above it, tiny swallows flew in a blue ring toward a sun that had never risen for anyone. I stepped away from the cradle at once. "I didn't know." "Yes," he said. "You did. It landed because it was true. There are moments when fear makes a lie rise naturally to the mouth. This was not one of them. He had already seen through me. If I lied now, it would only make me look insulting as well as stupid. "I knew it was forbidden," I said. "I didn't know why." He closed the lighter. Click. The sound seemed to go through my ribs. One of the guards shifted. "Boss, should I?" "No." That single word settled the room. I should have apologized immediately. Elena would have. Maria from the kitchen would have crossed herself, burst into tears, and survived. But something about the cradle behind me and the silence in front of me made my throat work differently. "I'm sorry," I said at last. "It won't happen again." "No," he said, "it won't." The meaning was plain enough. My hand moved to my apron pocket without thinking. The folded paper inside crackled. I had hidden it there because I hadn't wanted Elena to see. Because if she knew the clinic doctor had written threatened miscarriage across the top of my report and ordered immediate rest, she would tell me to stop working, and if I stopped working, I stopped eating. Dante's eyes dropped. He saw the paper. "So that's what you're hiding." "It's nothing." He held out a hand, not sharp, not impatient, just there. I should have refused. Instead, I took the report from my pocket, already warm from my body, and kept it in my fist. "Please," I said, That was the only time I begged. His face did not change. For what? Not a question. A demand for precision. For mercy, I whispered, hearing how foolish it was the moment it left me. I need this job. I won't go upstairs again. I won't even look at the door. Just please don't throw me out before I can keep my baby alive. I could not say it. Not with two armed men standing there and a stranger staring at me like truth was a debt he expected paid in full. He took one step into the room. I gave him the paper. He unfolded it once. Read. Read again. Something happened to his face then, not softness, never that, but the stillness changed temperature, like steel moved from cold water into ice. How far along? He asked. 12 weeks. Who knows? The clinic me, that's all. Yes, father. The word came down flat between us. Dead, I said. That much was also true. He read the report again. I knew what he saw. Patient Adriana Bellafier. Age 23. 12 weeks pregnant. Recent bleeding. No lifting. Strict rest advised. Risk elevated by stress and physical exertion. His jaw tightened once. One of the guards cleared his throat. Boss, Dante did not look at him. Get Dr. Ricks. The guard hesitated. Now? Yes, now, I stared. No, I'm fine. It stopped. His gaze lifted so slowly it felt like being pinned in stages. Did I ask? No. Then don't make me repeat myself. I went quiet. I don't know why that was the moment he kept looking at me. Maybe because I didn't cry. Maybe because I didn't grab at his sleeve or drop to my knees or make promises I couldn't keep. Fear was all over me. I could feel it in the shaking of my calves and the thin sweat cooling between my shoulder blades. But after that one plea, I had nothing else to spend. He noticed. The silence stretched, then unexpectedly his eyes moved to the teacup I had saved. You caught the porcelain first, he said. I frowned. What? When you turned. His voice was unreadable. You were frightened. You still caught it before it broke. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't think. Exactly. He folded the report with impossible neatness. Take her downstairs, he told the second guard. To the blue sitting room, lock the balcony, post someone at the door. The blood left my hands. I'm not a prisoner. Dante slid the report into the inside pocket of his coat. No, he said. You're a problem. I should have protested. I should have demanded my paper back, or told him he had no right. Instead, I looked at the nursery again. The covered cradle, the painted birds, the dust that had settled over a room grief had kept untouched, and something colder than fear moved through me. This house had ghosts. He saw me looking. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. Little sparrow, he said, not warmly, not cruelly either, simply as if naming the shape of me. If I wanted you harmed, we wouldn't still be standing here. I hated that the name hit somewhere soft. I hated more that I believed him. The guard opened his hand toward the door. I walked because my knees still worked, and because not walking would have been a kind of begging too. At the threshold, I stopped. I don't know what made me say it. Maybe the cradle. Maybe the report in his coat. Maybe the sense that the whole house had just tilted under my feet. I told the truth, I said without turning around. I only went in to clean the glass. Behind me, the lighter clicked open again. I know, Dante Salvator said. And I understood, in that instant, that my old life had ended upstairs beside a room no one entered. The blue sitting room smelled like beeswax, old books, and the rain starting against the windows. I sat on the edge of a velvet chair I was probably too poor to touch, and watched a guard twice my size stand by the door with his hands folded in front of him, as if he were attending church instead of babysitting a frightened housemaid. My palms would not stop sweating. I pressed them against my skirt and thought of all the ways a life could disappear. Quietly, mostly. One letter not answered. One landlord too impatient. One job lost because a doctor told the truth on paper. One dead fiancé and a child that had the nerve to keep growing anyway. I had been in the Salvator house 3 weeks. Before that, I rented half a room above a tailor's shop with a window so narrow the moon had to come in sideways. Before that, I had been someone else entirely. A woman engaged to a dockworker named Paolo Bellafier. No relation. just the same village name, who smelled like soap and salt and kissed my forehead before dawn because he thought I slept lighter than I did. He died in March. Knife in the ribs, the police said. Wrong place, wrong hour. Naples made that sentence sound ordinary when it wanted to. 3 weeks after the funeral, I fainted while rinsing sheets and woke on a clinic cot with a nurse telling me I was pregnant. Normal ended so quietly I almost missed it. The door opened. I sat up too fast. It was Dante. It was Maria from the kitchen, round-faced and flour-dusted, carrying a tray with broth, bread, and a plate of sliced pears. Behind her came Nino Belandi, one of Dante's men. I knew him by the expensive watch he checked every 4 minutes, and by the way he complained about carbohydrates, as if bread had personally betrayed his family. Maria clicked her tongue when she saw me. "Madonna, look at your face. I'm fine. You look like a saint in a painting 5 minutes before the arrow hits." She set the tray in front of me. "Eat." Nino shut the door with his shoulder and lowered his voice dramatically. "Technically, if she eats bread in my presence, I suffer too." Maria didn't even turn around. "Then suffer quietly. I am trying to be supportive of the unborn child. You're trying to steal the pears. I can support and steal at the same time." "I'm gifted." Despite everything, a laugh escaped me. Small, startled, Nino put a hand over his heart as if I'd blessed him. He was maybe 30, handsome in a careless way, with brown hair that never stayed combed and a suit that fit too well for how often he leaned on door frames. "There," he said solemnly. "A miracle." "We keep her." Maria smacked his arm with a folded napkin. "Go stand somewhere useless. That is almost my entire job description." He went anyway, but he grinned at me on the way. Maria crouched beside my chair, lowering her voice. "Did he frighten you?" I looked at the guard by the door, then at Nino, then back at her. "Yes." "Good," Nino said. "If Dante Salvator stops frightening people, we all have a much bigger problem." Maria made the sign of the cross toward the ceiling. "Dear Lord, thank you for not letting the boss kill anyone today." "That we know of." Even the guard looked like he wanted to smile. I held the spoon but didn't eat. "Am I dismissed?" Maria's face changed a little. Nino answered because she didn't. "Not exactly." My throat tightened. "Then what exactly?" The door opened again. Every body in the room altered in some small way. The guard straightened. Maria rose. Nino stopped smiling and moved aside like humor itself had to respect rank. Dante came in without hurry. The rain dark from outside still clung to his coat. He took in the tray, my untouched food, the 3 people around me, and settled his attention on Maria first. "Thank you." She dipped her head and left with the guard, dragging Nino by the sleeve when he tried to linger. "I wasn't finished being charming," he protested. "You've never been finished," Maria said. The door shut. Silence changed shape. Dante stayed standing for a moment, then moved to the chair across from me and sat, not close enough to crowd me. Close enough that I could see the faint silver at his cuff links and the thin pale scar near his thumb when he set his hand on the armrest. He placed my folded medical report on the table between us. "Dr. Rixai confirmed the clinic's findings." I stared at the paper. "You had no right." "No," he said, "but I had reason. And now you stop working." My head snapped up. "I can't." "You can. I need wages. You'll be paid." I almost laughed. "For sitting in a locked room. For carrying a child while men I don't trust move around my city." That made me go cold. "I don't understand." "You don't need to." He leaned back slightly. "You need to listen." I should have looked away. I didn't. "You came to this house 2 weeks after Paolo Bellafiore died," he said. "He worked loading containers at Dock 7. 3 days before his death, one of my shipments went missing. A customs officer who should have stayed blind suddenly found vision. Then you appear in my house under a false recommendation letter." My mouth opened, closed. "False!" "Elena believed it, so did the steward. That's what made it useful." I shook my head. "I didn't fake anything." "I know." I froze. He kept speaking in the same low, economical voice. "Which means someone placed you here." All at once I felt stupid in a deeper way than fear allowed. "Why would anyone do that?" That, Dante said, is the only question that matters. I thought of Paolo, of the nights he came home exhausted and wouldn't meet my eyes, of the way he had started checking the street twice before opening our door. I had called it grief from his father's death. Stress. Men were allowed private storms. Women spent whole lives pretending not to see them. My hands curled in my lap. Paolo wasn't part of your world. No one is part of my world until they are. The rain thickened at the windows. I hated him a little then, for saying it like fate was a business arrangement, for making Paolo sound like evidence. He was kind, I said, and my voice came out sharper than I intended. He fixed our sink with wire because we couldn't afford a plumber. He bought bruised peaches because they cost less. I didn't say he deserved what happened to him. I stopped. The words were so close to gentleness that they frightened me more than his coldness had. He noticed that too. Of course he did. I have rules, he said. You remain inside the estate. You speak to Maria, Elena, Nino, and whoever Dr. Rixai assigns to you. No calls without permission. No letters unscreened. No going near the docks. If anyone approaches you with questions, money, or sympathy, you tell me. You can't keep me here. I can. A flare of anger steadied me. Then say prisoner and be honest. His gaze dropped briefly to my mouth and back to my eyes. It happened so quickly I almost imagined it. Guest, he said. That's a pretty word for a locked balcony. That balcony stays locked because you're on the second floor and people fall. Accidentally? Sometimes. I should not have almost smiled. He saw the beginning of it, and something unreadable moved through his expression, gone before I could be sure it existed. You'll have the old schoolroom, he said. Brighter windows. Easier stairs. Why? Because you read a medical report and remembered something terrible, I thought. Because you went cold when you saw the word bleeding. Because there was a nursery upstairs that no one touched, and a city full of armed men still listened when you spoke like this. Instead he said, because I don't enjoy unnecessary risk. I let out a breath that wasn't a laugh. You really do say less than everyone else. Usually I know more. That should have ended it. Instead he reached for the broth and slid it toward me. The movement was so ordinary it unsettled me. Eat, he said. Are all your orders one word? When possible. I picked up the spoon because refusing it would have been childish, and because my body betrayed me by being hungry even now. The broth was rich with chicken and rosemary. Warmth spread through my stomach slowly, like something cautious entering a room. He watched until I took 3 full spoonfuls. Then he stood. At the door he paused, one hand on the brass handle. If you try to run, he said without turning, my men will find you before you clear the gate. That's reassuring. It isn't meant to be. The handle turned. Why little sparrow? I said, the question leaving me before pride could stop it. For the first time, he looked almost surprised. Then he glanced at the window, where rain tapped lightly against the glass. You're small, he said. You're quieter than frightened people usually are. And if I open the wrong door, you'll break your neck trying to fly through it. He left me with that. I sat very still, broth cooling in my hands, listening to his steps fade down the corridor. Outside, rain struck the shutters harder. Inside, the house settled around me like a locked jaw. My normal life was gone. The old schoolroom had green walls, 3 long windows, and a cracked globe in the corner with half the sea rubbed away. I stood in the center of it the next morning, while Elena supervised 2 maids changing the linens, and muttered under her breath about men who moved women around like furniture. She did not say Dante's name. In that house, power did not need repeating. It lived in the pauses before anyone used a title. You should be in bed, she told me for the 4th time. I slept. Bed rest and sleep are not identical. I looked at her. Were you always like this? She pursed her mouth. Like what? Like you survived everybody. That made her snort. Elena Russo was 50 if she was a day older than that, narrow as a reed and twice as unbreakable. She had worked for the Salvator family longer than most men in the city had remained alive. Her hair was iron gray. Her aprons were always pressed. Her warnings came in layers, practical first, affectionate only when she thought you were too stupid to notice. I survived by minding doors, she said. So mind this one, do not wander. Do not trust kindness too quickly in this house, especially if it wears a smile. Is that about Nino? It is always in some small way about Nino, as if summoned. He leaned into the doorway, carrying a vase of lemons. Did someone insult me from a distance? I felt a disturbance. Elena took the vase from him. Why are you holding produce? Maria says citrus improves air quality. Maria says many things, and I obey all of them, he said piously. That's why our love remains so tragic. She's threatened to poison you 3 times this week, which proves passion. Despite Elena's warning not to trust smiles, I liked him immediately. Not because he was harmless. Nobody this close to Dante Salvatore was harmless, but because he seemed determined to remain recognizably human in a house that polished humanity into something harder. He caught me looking and patted his stomach mournfully. For your information, I am on a strict regimen. No sugar, no pasta, no joy. You had cannoli yesterday, Elena said. That was medicinal. What illness? Despair. I laughed before I could help it. Again that startled little sound. It felt rusty, like something I had not used enough to trust. Nino brightened. Excellent. If the boss asks, tell him morale is improving under my supervision. The boss, Elena said dryly, does not ask your opinion on morale. He should. I'm a specialist. He left the lemons and vanished again, humming under his breath. When the room was finished, Elena sat me by the window with tea and embroidery she claimed would keep my hands from reaching for mops. I told her I was no good at sitting still. She told me the child might disagree. That was how Maria found me at noon, with pale thread looped clumsily through linen and my jaw set against uselessness. Ah, she said, peering over my shoulder. You mend like a woman trying not to cry. I embroider like a woman who shouldn't be allowed near fabric. Same thing. She set down a bowl of lentils and tucked a wooden box under her arm. Open it. Inside lay a compact blood pressure cuff, a thermometer, rolled bandages, and a stethoscope with worn black tubing. I stared. Where did you get this? Storage. Why? My fingertips hovered over the stethoscope. Something old and painful moved under my breastbone. I used to train, I said quietly. At Santa Lucia, midwifery first, general nursing classes too. Nights only. I stopped when Paolo died. Maria's eyes softened. You know how to use these? Yes. I picked up the cuff without thinking, checking the valve, the rubber, the stitching at the seams. My hands remembered before the rest of me did. For one strange second, I was back in a small hospital classroom with chalk dust on my sleeves, learning how to count a heartbeat while the world still believed in tomorrow. Maria watched my face. There, she said softly, that's the first useful thing you've looked at all morning. I almost told her not to say useful like it could fix anything. But the truth was uglier. Being reminded I knew how to help made something inside me sit up. That evening proved it mattered. One of the younger footmen slipped on the back stairs, carrying wine crates, and opened his forearm on the corner of a brass stand. By the time someone called for Doctor Rixai, the boy was pale and swaying, blood dripping onto the kitchen tiles while 4 grown men shouted conflicting advice over him. I moved before I thought. Sit him down, I said. No one listened. So I raised my voice, sharp enough to cut through panic. Sit him down. That worked. I tore a dish towel into strips, pressed hard above the wound, and looked at the boy's face instead of the blood. Breathe slower, you're making it worse. His chest fluttered. Maria steadied his shoulders. Nino, unexpectedly efficient now, held the lamp lower and stopped talking. The cut was deep but clean, no spurting artery. Thank God, doctor. Rixai arrived as I finished wrapping the compression bandage. He blinked at my work, then at me. Who did this? She did, Nino said, sounding almost proud. Our little sparrow has claws. I hated that the nickname hit me differently from him. Dr. Rixai examined the bandage and grunted approval. Good pressure. Better than half the interns I trained. He looked at me. You studied, I nodded. At the kitchen door, a stillness entered the room before the man himself did. Dante, everyone altered at once. Again. He took in the blood, the footman, the bandage, my hands stained red to the wrists. What happened? The footman started to speak. I answered first. He slipped. Dante's gaze moved to the bandage. And 3 stitches, probably 4. He got frightened before he got weak. Silence. Then to Dr. Rixey, treat him. I turned to wash my hands. The water in the sink ran pink, then clear. I was aware of Dante behind me the whole time, not touching, not speaking. Just there, a pressure in the room, a temperature shift. When I reached for the towel, another hand got there first. He held it out. I took it carefully. Our fingers brushed. That should have been nothing. Skin, heat. A stupid accident in a kitchen full of onions and steam. Instead, my whole body noticed. His hand was warmer than I expected, scarred across the knuckles, steady. I dried my hands too slowly. Where did you learn that? He asked. Hospital training. You left. Yes. Why? My life changed. His eyes settled on me with that unnerving patience of his. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. The room around us kept moving. Maria barked for fresh broth. Dr. Rixey cursed softly at thread too short for his needle. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle roared through the courtyard. But it all seemed far away for a moment, narrowed to the towel in my hands, and the man watching me as if some shape had just sharpened into focus. He spoke without looking away. Come to my office after dinner. I stiffened. Why? Because whoever placed you here may have underestimated you. Nino made the mistake of murmuring, that never ends well. Dante left before anyone could blame him for saying it. I went to his office because refusing him inside his own house would have been a different form of stupidity. Books lined the walls. The desk was black walnut, brutal in its neatness. A map of the harbor hung under glass with colored pins marking routes and warehouses. I had never seen so much controlled information in one room. Men went to war with guns, yes. But this room said some wars began with paper. Dante stood by the windows with his lighter in one hand. Click. He did not light it. Paolo filed for a temporary dock transfer 2 weeks before he died, he said. To Warehouse 12, he never made the change. I shut the door behind me. I didn't know that. I believe you. Then why am I here? He turned. Because someone wanted you in my house, and I want to know whether they sent a witness or bait. I should have been insulted. Instead, I felt tired all the way down to the bones. And if I'm neither? His gaze lowered, just briefly, to my stomach. Then you're a woman carrying a child in a house built by men who forget what that should mean. The words hit somewhere too deep to answer from. Before I could, a knock came. Sharp. Urgent. A guard stepped in. Boss, we caught one of Marchese's men near the east gate. Dante's face changed in a way that made the room seem suddenly smaller. Alive. Barely. He moved toward the door. Stopped when he reached me. Stay away from the windows tonight, he said. Then he was gone. I stood in the center of his office, the harbor map watching from the wall, and understood that whatever had begun with Paolo's death was moving closer. Someone was already coming for us. The first gunshot I heard in the Salvetter house did not sound cinematic. It sounded flat, ugly, immediate. I was in the private chapel at the rear of the estate because Maria had sent me there with a basket of folded altar cloths and strict instructions not to carry anything heavier than linen. The chapel was small, more family than church, with stone saints worn smooth at the feet and candles that left wax tears down the brass stands. I liked it because no one came there to speak unless they meant it. I had just laid the cloth over the side table when the shot cracked through the courtyard outside. Then another. The basket slipped from my fingers. A second later, the chapel door burst open and Renzo Vitelli, head of security, filled the frame with his gun already drawn. He was broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, and permanently looked as if the world had disappointed him personally. Down, he barked. I hit the floor behind the first pew. More shots followed. Close enough that the stained glass window above the altar trembled. I flattened myself to the cold stone and pressed a hand over my stomach so hard it hurt. Renzo moved to the side of the doorway, gun up, every part of him sharpened into function. The candles on the left rack shook in their sockets. Wax slid down in thick white tears, then footsteps. Fast, heavy, not cautious enough to belong to Salvetor men. Renzo fired once. A body hit the chapel steps with a sound I felt in my teeth. I swallowed a cry and stayed where I was. That, more than anything, was what the Salvetor house had taught me in a month. Motion could kill you as quickly as malice. "Boss is in the West Court," Renzo snapped to someone outside. "They're trying to split us." Another shot answered him from farther off. He looked back at me only once. "When I move, you run behind the pews. If I say down, you go down." "If I say don't look, you don't look." I nodded. He frowned. "Use words." "Yes." The next 10 seconds stretched into something awful and elastic. Men shouted in Italian outside, quick and clipped. A window broke somewhere. Then a familiar voice cut through the gunfire, not loud but carrying anyway. "Renzo, Dante." Renzo exhaled once through his nose, relief disguised as irritation. Inside, Dante came through the chapel door with blood on his cuff and rain on his shoulders. He did not look winded. He looked, if anything, more still than usual, which was its own species of terror. His eyes found me behind the pew, checked me head to foot, and moved on only after confirming I was intact. "Report," he said. "3 at the east wall, 1 down here, 1 escaped the olive path. Inside access? Maybe." That single word changed his face more than the blood had. Dante turned to me. "Stand up," I did, though my knees objected. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Good." "You're coming with me. I'll slow you down. You'll slow me down more if I leave you here." The honesty of it stole the argument from my mouth. He stepped close enough to take my elbow. Not my wrist, not the back of my neck. My elbow, careful and firm, as if the exact degree of pressure mattered. We moved together through the side sacristy, Renzo covering behind us. The corridor beyond smelled like dust, incense, and cordite. Somewhere above, an alarm had begun to pulse in slow red flashes against the walls. At the end of the passage, a young guard slumped against the plaster, hand clamped to his thigh. Blood spread between his fingers. Without thinking, I stopped. Dante's grip tightened. "Keep moving. He's bleeding. I can see that. He needs pressure and a tourniquet. He has men. He has boys," I snapped. Because 2 terrified footmen were hovering over the guard, as if fear might sew flesh together. Dante stared at me for 1 hard second, then he let go. 30 seconds. I was already kneeling. I tore the sash from my dress, looped it above the wound, and twisted it tight with the handle of a silver, serving spoon one of the footmen still held for no reason anyone sane could explain. The guard bit down on a curse. I kept my hands steady and my voice steadier. "Look at me, stay awake." His pupils found mine. Good, better than glassy. When I finished, I rose too quickly and the corridor tipped. Dante's hand came to my waist, just for a moment, holding me upright. Heat went through me so sharply it embarrassed me. "Done," I said. His hand left as if it had not been there. We moved. The safe room was below the library, behind a paneled wall I would never have found alone. Maria was already inside with Alina, Dr. Rixai, and Nino, who was carrying ammunition crates with the affronted expression of a man personally betrayed by cardio. "I am a logistics professional," he complained as Renzo shoved the last crate past him. "This is lifting. Lifting is not logistics." Maria looked up from the bandages she was sorting. "If you die whining, I won't cry at your funeral." "Liar," he said. "You'd wear black and regret everything." "No," she said. "I'd wear red." That ridiculous exchange, in that concrete room under a violent house, almost made me laugh from sheer nerves. Dante noticed. His eyes rested on my face for a fraction too long before he turned to Renzo. "Sweep the servant stairs. No one moves alone." Renzo nodded and left. Dr. Rixai reached for me immediately. "Sit, I'm fine." "Pregnant women who say that," he muttered, "are never fine." He checked my pulse, my blood pressure, my pupils as if I were another casualty. I let him because Dante was already working across the room, with a map pinned to the wall, and because I wanted very badly not to be watched by him while my body remembered fear. Nino drifted to my side with a bottle of water. "For the record," he said, "if this turns into a siege, I'm filing a complaint about provisions. There are almonds in that cabinet. Almonds. Do you know what fear does to a man on a restricted diet? Improves his personality, I offered. He pressed a hand to his chest. Maria, she wounds me. Maria didn't glance up. Good, Dante's lighter clicked once. The sound silenced half the room. He was bent over the map, speaking to two men in low Italian I could not fully follow, but I heard enough. Marchese, docks. South route, breach. Inside help. My skin chilled. Someone had indeed opened the house from within. As if feeling my eyes on him, Dante looked over. For one suspended second, the room dropped away. The men, the map, the red alarm light, the muffled thunder of violence above us. There was just that look, dark, direct, withholding too much. Then he severed it and returned to the map as if he had not let anything show at all. I hated that my breath changed anyway. The all-clear came an hour later. 3 dead attackers. 2 wounded Salvator men. 1 gap in the east wall cameras that made Renzo swear with inventiveness I would later admire. When the room began to empty, Dante came to where I stood beside the metal shelf of medical supplies. His cuff was still blood-stained. I could smell rain on his coat and something colder under it, the outside dark clinging to him. You disobeyed me, he said. I blinked. The guard was bleeding. I noticed. He needed help. He had help. He had boys and panic. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. You always answer like that when you're frightened. No, when I'm right. That should have annoyed him. Instead, his gaze dropped briefly to my lips again. The red alarm light painted one side of his face, then went out with a click as the power reset. Darkness slid back into ordinary yellow. A strand of my hair had come loose and stuck to my cheek with sweat. Before I could move it, he did. Just one knuckle, one impossible, careful pass. The chapel, the blood, the gunshots, all of it shifted under the weight of that tiny touch. Neither of us stepped back soon enough. Boss, Nino called from the doorway, then stopped dead. Oh. Terrible timing. I can come back with worse news later if that helps the atmosphere. Dante's hand dropped at once. Nino looked between us and sighed theatrically. You know, every time I witness tension this severe, I lose another kilogram, which sounds nice until you realize I already miss pasta. What news? Dante said. Renzo found the gate log. Nino's tone changed. One signature doesn't match the night staff. Someone forged entry clearance from inside the office. Dante's face shuddered again. He turned to me. You're returning to the schoolroom. Maria stays with you tonight. I don't need. You do. There it was, that quiet control that made defiance feel childish, yet something in me pushed anyway. You can't order fear away. His eyes held mine. No, then stop speaking as if you can. For a moment I thought I had gone too far. The room became very still. Then he said, softer than before, Little Sparrow, if I could order this house to become harmless, I would have done it years ago. The answer sat between us with more truth than he probably intended. He stepped back first. Of course he did. Later, long after Maria had bullied me into broth and bed, I lay awake listening to rain ease over the shutters and thought of his hand at my cheek. Not the touch itself, the restraint of it, the fact that he had touched me as if he were the one in danger of breaking something. Below the house, men were still mopping blood from stone. Above it, I could not stop thinking about his hand. The morning after the attack, the house moved more quietly. Not calmer. Quiet was not calm in a place like that. Quiet meant men were counting injuries, checking loyalties, reviewing footage frame by frame. Quiet meant someone had failed Dante Salvator and had not yet been told in what exact manner he would pay for it. Maria kept me close to the kitchen for most of the day under the excuse that the schoolroom windows were too drafty. I suspected she simply wanted eyes on me. Elena pretended not to agree, while agreeing entirely. Nino roamed in and out with lists, keys, and dramatic sighs about the collapse of civilized eating now that security had put everyone on rotating shifts. At this point, he muttered, peering into a container of boiled eggs as if it had insulted him, I am 1 olive away from joining a monastery. You'd get expelled by noon, Maria said. For charm, for gossip, He brightened when he saw me at the prep table. "Ah, our patient fugitive. Have you considered telling the boss you're perfectly healthy and wish to return to dangerous staircases? It might improve my schedule." "It might worsen your funeral," Maria said. I was sorting linens instead of sitting, because sitting still felt too much like surrender. One stack held tablecloths, another napkins, another the damaged household pieces too fine to discard. At the bottom of that last pile lay a folded square of ivory wool trimmed with hand-tatted lace. I knew it before I fully opened it. A christening blanket. Old, beautiful. Torn diagonally through the center, as if someone had gripped it too hard. The break was clean enough to mend if the stitches were tiny. Maria saw where my hands had stopped. "That came from upstairs," she said quietly. "Elena was going to store it again." I traced the torn edge with one finger. "Who ripped it?" "No one asks." That meant everyone knew. I should have put it back. Instead, I asked for needle, silk thread, and a lamp with better light. Maria watched me settle by the window. "You can fix that." "I can try." The work demanded breath and patience. Invisible mending was less sewing than listening. Where had the tension originally sat? Which threads still wanted to return to one another? How much force would pull the tear wider, instead of closing it? It felt strangely like grief. You could not make cloth new, you could only help it hold. Nino came by twice, first to steal a fig, second to stare over my shoulder. "You're making the wound disappear," he said. "No," I kept my eyes on the blanket. "I'm making it less likely to open again." He was uncharacteristically silent for a beat. Then he sighed. "If Maria ever leaves me emotionally, I hope someone stitches me back together with that much care." Maria threw a dish towel at his head without looking. By late afternoon, Dr. Rixai arrived with a face too grave for routine. He checked me in the schoolroom while rain darkened the terrace stones outside. "No lifting," he said again. "No stress. I live in a fortress that was attacked yesterday." "Yes," he said dryly, "that complicates my best advice." He packed away the blood pressure cuff, then hesitated. "There is one more thing. Your original clinic report omitted some bruising." I stared at him. "What bruising?" "The old fracture line at your left rib. It's healed badly." "Not recent." My hand went there instinctively. He noticed, and the gentleness in his eyes made me want to leave the room. "Who hurt you, Adriana?" "No one." That answer bores me. I looked at the rain. After Paolo died, his cousin came to the apartment drunk twice. The second time he pushed me into the stove when I wouldn't give him Paolo's union papers. Dr. Rixai's mouth flattened. "Did you report it?" "To whom?" "Fair enough," his silence said. I should not have told him that. I knew exactly why I had. Because keeping every ugly thing unnamed had begun to feel like another form of helping the men who did them. I did not know Dante had come to the half-open schoolroom door until Dr. Rixai stood. The doctor's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "I'll leave you too." I wanted to say no. Instead, I sat there with one hand over the healed rib and watched Dante enter. His gaze flicked once to that hand. "What papers?" he asked. I closed my eyes briefly. "Of course, doctor." Rixai had not repeated the whole conversation. He had not needed to. Dante was the kind of man other people spoke around, and he still heard the center of things. "Paolo's work papers," I said. "His cousin thought he was hiding money." "Was he?" "No, you're sure?" "Yes." Dante came farther in. The schoolroom always seemed smaller when he entered it, not because he was large. Because every object around him became suddenly more specific. "You should have told me about the cousin." "Why?" "Because he won't touch you again." The certainty in his voice chilled me. "You can't kill every man who's ever frightened a woman," I said. His eyes held mine. "No, only the ones who continue." The answer did nothing comforting to my pulse. He noticed the blanket in my lap then. His stillness altered. "Where did you get that?" "Storage. You shouldn't have." "I know." His face gave nothing away, yet I could feel memory move through the room like a draft. I lifted the blanket slightly. "It was torn. I can see that. I'm mending it." "I can see that too." I almost smiled despite myself. "You must find conversation exhausting." "Usually." His gaze rested on my stitches. Not on my face, not on my stomach, on the fine line where torn wool met itself again. Why bother, he said, because broken things offend me less when they try, I nearly answered. Instead I said, because not everything torn should be thrown away. Something in his expression tightened with almost invisible violence, not anger at me, at the sentence. Adriana, it was the first time he had used my name. I hated how much I felt it. Before I could answer, Renzo appeared in the corridor. Boss. We found the source of the false recommendation. Dante's attention snapped to him. Who? Signed through estate legal. Dante's face turned to stone. Estate legal meant Cesare Valenti, Dante's longtime consigliere. The man who moved papers, names, inheritances, contracts. The man with soft hands, courteous manners, and a voice that never rose. That's impossible, I said. Both men looked at me. I realized too late what I had exposed. You know Cesare, Dante said. He interviewed me. When? The day Alina hired me. He said all new women on staff passed through him if their references came from outside Naples. Renzo and Dante exchanged a look so brief I almost missed it. That was bad. Very bad. Dante moved toward the door, then stopped. He turned back and came close enough that I could see the rough shadow at his jaw, the weariness he never let into his voice. If Cesare asks you anything, he said, you answer carefully. Carefully means what? It means you tell him nothing you haven't already told me, and if I've told you very little. His gaze lowered to the blanket. Then to my hand, over the old bruise at my rib. That's changing. He left on that, taking Renzo and the air with him. I sat very still, blanket in my lap, needle suspended between my fingers. By dusk, the first half of my secret had surfaced. Not the pregnancy, that everyone important already knew. The other half, Paolo's papers, the cousin, Cesare's interview, the fact that I had entered the Salvator house through a door someone smarter than me had opened on purpose. That night I made a mistake. Cesare Valenti found me alone in the library just after 9, silver-haired and elegant, a grandfatherly devil in a charcoal suit. My dear Adriana, he said warmly. You've been through so much. No one had called me dear since before Paolo died. I should have left. Instead, I listened. And when he said, very gently, if you ever remember anything about Paolo's last week, I can help you speak to Dante in a way he'll hear. I answered one question too honestly. I told him Paolo had hidden something behind a loose brick in our kitchen wall. The second the words left my mouth, I wanted them back. Cesare's smile did not change. That was how I knew I had just given the wrong man exactly what he needed. Dante did not speak to me the next morning. That should have relieved me. Instead, I spent the first hours of daylight listening for the click of his lighter, the way a foolish woman might listen for her own name. Nino found me by the citrus trees in the glass-roofed corridor after breakfast, pretending fresh air counted as bed rest if one moved slowly enough. You look guilty, he said. I startled. Do I? Yes. Maria gets that face when she uses salted butter and waits for God to punish her. I made a mistake. Excellent. He folded himself onto the bench beside me. Now you're one of us. I managed half a smile. You don't even know what it is. No, but in this house mistakes are either emotional, fatal, or paperwork. You don't seem like paperwork. Before I could answer, Renzo appeared at the far end of the corridor. He was flanked by 2 guards and carrying the kind of urgency that erased jokes on contact. Inside, he said. Nino rose in one smooth motion. What happened? Car bomb at the south gate, decoy. Real hit team entered through the wine tunnels. The words had barely landed when the first explosion shook the glass overhead. Not the car bomb. This was inside the grounds. The corridor windows burst inward in a rain of shards. Nino threw himself over me so fast, I only understood what he'd done when glass struck his back instead of my face. Renzo was already firing toward the far archway where 2 masked men rushed through smoke. Everything became noise. Splintering glass. Gunshots like metal slammed against metal. My own breath trapped somewhere too high in my chest. Nino dragged me behind the stone planter. Do not, he gasped, Make me die protecting a woman who hasn't even told Maria I'm handsome. You're impossible. Yes, he said, baring his teeth as another shot cracked past us. But alive. Then Dante was there. I did not see him arrive. 1 second smoke filled the corridor, the next he was a black shape moving through it with terrifying efficiency. He shot one attacker twice center mass, disarmed the second with a movement so controlled it looked almost quiet, and drove him into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. "Who sent you?" Dante said. The man spat blood. Dante's gun shifted once toward his knee. I turned away before the answer came out, not because I was weak. Because I had already seen enough of what men became when power met pain, and I could not bear to watch Dante cross that line in front of me again. His voice reached me anyway. Low, final. Wrong answer. Renzo hauled me to my feet. Boss, she needs out. I'm not leaving Nino. I'm fine, Nino lied from the floor, a glittering layer of broken safety glass on his shoulders like a cursed snowfall. Apart from the fact that this suit was imported. Another shot sounded from somewhere deeper in the house. Dante turned toward it, then back to me. His face had that terrible composure I was beginning to understand, the kind that meant his fear had become function. Come here, I did. He gripped the back of my neck just once, not harshly, but with a claim in it that changed my pulse into something wild. He checked my face for cuts, my arms, my throat. His hands were quick, searching, restrained only by necessity. I'm all right, I whispered. You're bleeding. I touched my temple and found a smear of red from a shallow slice near the hairline. Nothing, hardly anything. His eyes changed anyway. For one breathless second, the corridor vanished, and there was only the fact that he looked at my blood as if the sight of it offended him personally. Then he let me go. Take her below, he ordered Renzo. No. Both men looked at me. I heard how impossible that sounded and kept going anyway. No, Nino is cut. There are wounded downstairs. Doctor. Ricks, I can't be everywhere. Dante's jaw set. This is not a debate. I know that, I said, stepping closer before courage failed me. But I know how to help. And if I sit in a bunker while people bleed 10 feet away, I'll go mad. The silence that followed was violent in its own way. He could have shouted. Could have overruled me with one word. Instead, he stared at me like I had presented a problem with no clean solution, maybe because I had. Then, astonishingly, he nodded once. You stay with Dr. Rixai, you do exactly what he says. If Renzo tells you to move, you move. Yes. His gaze held mine 1 second longer. Do not make me regret this. The words should have felt like command. Instead, they felt like trust sharpened to fear. We went below again. This time the safe room smelled of antiseptic and blood. I worked beside Dr. Rixai for what might have been 2 hours or 20 minutes, pressing wounds, counting pulses, cutting sleeves, tying off bandages. My own body forgot itself while there was useful work to do. Somewhere in the middle of it, Nino staggered in with a graze along his ribs and announced, I would like the official record to show I was magnificent. Maria started crying and hitting him at the same time. Ow, he protested. Choose one emotion. I am choosing all of them. It was so absurd I laughed through the sting in my eyes. Later, after the last gunshots had stopped, and the house settled into the exhausted quiet that follows surviving, I found a moment alone by the service balcony sink, washing blood from my wrists. The door opened behind me. I knew it was Dante before I turned. Not by the suit, not by the footsteps, by the click of his lighter. He stood in the doorway with a cut across his cheekbone and someone else's blood on his collar. He looked more human injured. That was the worst of it. Not less frightening, more reachable. Renzo said you refused cover, he said. Renzo complains professionally. He was not complaining. I shut off the tap. Neither am I, he came closer. The night air moved in behind him, smelling of wet stone and smoke. He also said you argued with me in the middle of an ambush. That too, and I still think I was right. A strange, brief sound left him, not quite laughter, closer than I had heard before. Then he reached out and touched the cut at my temple with one thumb. I stopped breathing. You should have let Rixai close this. It's tiny. That isn't the point. His hand remained there a second too long, then two. My body knew before my mind did that this was one of those impossible almost moments, the kind that made the whole room feel tilted. "Why," he said quietly, almost to himself, "did you go silent in the nursery?" I blinked. "What?" "That first night." His thumb lowered, tracing the line of my cheek without pressure. "You begged once, then stopped. Everyone else keeps talking when they're afraid. They lie, bargain, threaten. You told the truth and went quiet." I stared at him. He had noticed that. Of all things that, his eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time I saw the admission there before he said it. "That's why I kept looking at you," he said. The world narrowed painfully. I should have stepped back. I didn't. My hand came up of its own accord and caught in the front of his shirt. Not pulling, just holding, because suddenly I needed proof that he was solid, and not some dangerous thought my body had made. His breath changed. "Adriana." I had never heard my name sound like that. I said the only thing I could, not brave, not bold, just true enough to cost me. "If you're going to kiss me, don't do it because I'm frightened." Something cracked behind his eyes. He bent his forehead to mine, breathing once, twice, as if mastering himself was a physical act. "That," he said roughly, "is exactly why I shouldn't." Then he stepped back. The loss of him was immediate. He looked at me as if leaving had hurt. "War is here," he said. "Marquez, it won't stop at my gates again." He left before I could answer. For one paragraph of the night, his mind became visible to no one but himself. Dante had wanted her from the moment she told the truth, and then stood in her fear without dressing it up. Not because she was soft, because she was, because silence like that did not exist in his world, because she touched blood and steadied. Because she made him remember the man he had been before grief taught him efficiency. He had nearly kissed her with smoke on his hands. He would rather have cut off that hand than let the first touch between them happen like that. When the balcony door clicked shut, I pressed my fingers to my lips anyway. War had arrived. So something worse. By the time the police collected bodies from the outer road, the newspapers were already calling it a gas explosion. Naples had a genius for lying politely. Inside the Salvator estate, no one bothered pretending. The corridors smelled of plastered dust and gun oil. New guards rotated every 6 hours. Renzo checked locks himself. Maria fed people like food could staple a house back together. Nino walked with a bandage hidden under his jacket and acted personally offended whenever anyone suggested he rest. "Rest is for people without purpose," he declared while failing to lift a crate because his side hurt. "Rest is for idiots who enjoy surviving," Maria shot back. He looked at me hopefully. "Tell her I'm heroic." "You're dramatic," I said. "Those are cousins." Even laughing had become edged. That was the cost of proximity to Dante's world. Everything stayed itself, but darker around the outline. My own cost arrived on a Thursday. Alina found me in the laundry room folding blankets and said, too carefully, "You have a visitor." No one said visitor carefully unless danger had already entered the sentence. It was Paolo's mother. She stood in the side parlor in her good black coat, twisting her rosary around one wrist until the beads dug crescents into her skin. I had not seen her in months. Guilt hit so hard I nearly sat down. "Signora Bellafiore." Her eyes went to my stomach first, then to my face. "You didn't come back," she said, no accusation in it, worse, hurt. I was working, in a Salvator house. I opened my mouth and closed it again. She took a shaky breath. "The neighbors told me." They also told me my son was mixed up in things he should never have seen. Her chin lifted with an old woman's dignity. "I came to ask if that's true." I should have lied. For her peace, if not mine. Instead I heard myself say, "I think he saw something at the docks." Her eyes shut. When she opened them, they were full of a grief with more years in it than mine. "He hid an envelope behind the brick over our stove before he died," she said. "I found the hole after the police left." Every part of me went cold. Cesare. I had told him about the brick. "What was in it?" I asked. "I never saw. 2 men came before dawn and tore the kitchen apart." I ran to my sister S. When I returned, the brick was loose and the envelope gone. I sat because my legs no longer trusted the floor. Why are you telling me now? Because yesterday a man followed me from church. Her fingers crushed the rosary beads. He said if I cared about the baby you carry, I should convince you to leave Salvator protection before war reaches women who are too proud to know when to run. The room tilted. Dante had been right about one thing from the beginning. My presence in his house was not an accident. I had been placed there. Used, threatened by implication. Wrapped around secrets men were willing to kill for, Paolo's mother reached for my hand. Come away with me. We can go to Bari. My cousin has rooms. For one beautiful, miserable second, I saw it. A train station. A rented room over a bakery. Work in some quiet clinic where no one wore a gun under their jacket. A child raised on ordinary caution instead of armed walls. A life that had not chosen me back but might still accept me if I ran fast enough. That was the exit. Real, open, mine. I asked for 1 hour. When she left to wait in the chapel, I walked the estate grounds alone for the first time in weeks because Renzo was at the front gate and Dante was in a warehouse meeting that had run long. No one stopped me. Maybe that was the point. Maybe everyone believed the walls had already made my choice for me. I reached the outer service gate and found it unlatched, open by 3 inches. Enough. The road beyond curved down toward the city, sun-hot and ordinary. Scooters whined in the distance. Somewhere a vendor shouted about peaches. Life beyond the gate had the indecency to continue. I stepped through, 1 pace, then 2. No one dragged me back, my chest hurt. This then was what freedom felt like now, not triumph, grief. Because if I kept going, I could save myself a version of future pain. My child would not learn the names of calibers before colors. I could choose a smaller life, a cleaner one, and maybe that would still count as brave. Then I thought of Nino under broken glass, Maria crying and hitting him because he had survived. Elena pretending not to care while leaving tea at my door. Renzo teaching the younger guards to lower their voices outside my room. Doctor. Rixai pressing a stethoscope into my hands because he had seen the woman I was before fear narrowed me. And Dante. Dante in the chapel doorway, blood on his cuff. Dante on the balcony, not kissing me because I mattered more to him than wanting me. Dante saying he would have ordered the house harmless if he could. I understood then that leaving would not only cost him. It would cost me the last honest thing I had found in months. The knowledge that beneath all his violence, he had still chosen my safety over his desire every time. That made the road harder to take, not easier. A car came around the bend too fast. I knew the color before I knew the driver. Black sedan, tinted windows, Salvator fleet, it braked hard. Dante got out. For one suspended second, he simply looked at me standing outside his gate with a small canvas bag in my hand. No rage, no relief. Those would have been easier. Just that terrible stillness. He crossed the distance slowly. I see, he said. The quiet in his voice cut worse than anger could have. I swallowed. Paolo's mother came. I know. Then you know why I had to think. Yes, I stared at the gravel between us. This world kills the wrong people. It does. I could leave. You could. No threat. No claim, nothing but fact. That made tears burn all at once. I hate that you aren't stopping me. His face changed then, barely. If I stop you now, you'll never know whether you stayed because you chose me or because I made the choice for you. The word me hit harder than it should have. I looked up. Did you mean to say that? His jaw tightened. Behind us at the chapel bell tower the hour struck once. Then again, I thought of Paolo, of the envelope. Of men using my body and my child as leverage while expecting me to remain soft enough not to notice. I thought of the open gate, of a future made of avoidance. Of the uglier, truer fact that I did not want to spend the rest of my life wondering whether I had abandoned something worth the fear. So I set the canvas bag down on the road. I'm not staying because I'm trapped, I said. Dante said nothing. I'm staying because if this started with Paolo, then it ends with me seeing it through. And because, my voice shook, I let it. I know what your world costs now. He came 1 step closer. Adriana, I'm still frightened. You should be. I'm not frightened of you. That was stage 2 said aloud at last, and it nearly undid me. His eyes darkened. That may be the more dangerous problem. I laughed through tears. I hadn't granted permission to fall. Yes. He looked at the bag on the road, then back at me. If you walk back in, little sparrow, you do it with open eyes. I know. I picked up the bag and turned toward the gate. My old life stayed outside with the road. I walked back into the darkness myself. I was taken 3 nights later, not from my room, not in a dramatic midnight rush, from the clinic annex on Via Caracciolo where Dr. Rixai had insisted on taking me for a discreet ultrasound because the estate equipment was old and my last bleed still worried him. Renzo had objected. Dante had objected harder. But one black SUV, 2 guards, and a 10-minute window in and out was judged acceptable. That was the kind of error war produces, not stupidity, fatigue. The waiting room smelled of bleach and tired flowers. I had just heard the baby's heartbeat, small, rapid, defiant, when the lights failed. The backup generator kicked in a half-second too late. Long enough, a nurse screamed in the hallway. Someone shouted in Italian. One of the guards fired, and the sound in that narrow corridor was monstrous. Then a hand clamped over my mouth from behind. I bit hard, the hand jerked. I twisted, catching only a glimpse of black cloth and pale eyes before a needle stabbed my neck. The world did not go out cleanly. It blurred in layers, sealing. Fluorescent buzz, Dr. Rixay on the floor with blood at his temple. The heartbeat printout crumpled under a boot, my own body becoming too heavy to command. When I woke, there were no windows. Just concrete, a cot, 1 chair, a bucket in the corner, and Cesare Valenti sitting across from me with a sorrowful expression he had no right to wear. For a while I could only stare. He folded his hands. I wish this had been avoidable. The rage that rose in me steadied everything else. You. Yes. Why? He sighed as if I were disappointing him by needing the obvious named. Because Dante has become sentimental in the worst possible direction. That direction being women not dying. One corner of his mouth twitched. Your influence already. I tried the door with my eyes. Steel, locked from outside. My head still swam from whatever they had used, but fear burned through it enough to let me sit upright. What did Paolo see? Cesare's expression altered. There, that's the real question. He saw Vittorio Marchese buying Port Authority names from one of our own accounts. Payments signed through shell companies your poor Paolo should never have noticed. Whose accounts? He smiled sadly. Mine. The room chilled. You did all this. I built half of Dante's legal empire while his father broke the other half with his fists. I kept the family alive through transitions, arrests, funerals. And what did it earn me? A younger man with prettier principles deciding mercy could coexist with power. He leaned back. It cannot. I thought of Dante refusing to drag me back through the gate. Of him not kissing me on the balcony, because wanting and taking were not the same to him. You're wrong, so are all women in love with difficult men. I'm not, please. Cesare looked almost bored. He moved you to brighter rooms, stationed Maria outside your door, altered guard rotations, and nearly shot one of his own men for speaking your name too casually after the second attack. Let us not waste time. I went cold for reasons that had nothing to do with the room. Where is Dante? Looking everywhere useful except here, I hope. Cesare rose and smoothed his cuffs. Vittorio wants the port routes. I want Dante reminded that hearts are liabilities. Between us, your child is leverage enough to move a city. He moved toward the door. Cesare, he paused. I told you about the brick because I thought you were trying to help. Something human flickered across his face then. Regret, perhaps, or memory of a self he no longer liked visiting. I know, he said. That is why I almost told you to run farther. The door shut. I was alone with the kind of terror that has no performance in it, no audience, no dignity. Just breath and pulse and the unbearable knowledge that another life beat under my own. I cried for exactly 1 minute. Then I stopped, because no one was coming for a woman who only cried. I searched the room instead. The cot frame was bolted. The chair was metal, light enough to lift. The bucket was empty. The only weak point I could find was the vent cover near the floor, screwed in with flat-headed bolts. No tools. I tore the underwire from my bra, bent it against the chair edge, and started working at the screws one fraction at a time. It took an hour and bloodied my fingers. Worth it. Behind the vent lay not an escape tunnel, but a crawlspace carrying sound from the adjacent room. Men's voices, blurred at first, then sharper when I pressed my ear close. Vittorio Marchese had a voice like old velvet dragged over broken glass. "He'll come, you know he will," Cesare answered. "Yes, that is the problem and the solution." Vittorio laughed softly. "You should have let me kill him years ago when he was still his father's son. He changed." "Exactly." That, more than anything, told me what Vittorio was, not a monster outside Dante. A mirror behind him, the version that believed softness once admitted had to be excised. I listened harder. Warehouse 12, tied schedules, old tunnels below the sea wall, midnight exchange, good. Useful. Then Vittorio said something that made the room disappear around me. "Does he know his sister died because your driver delayed the clinic car?" My breath stopped. Cesare was silent. Vittorio went on, amused. "Imagine his face when he learns the bleeding woman in the back seat could have lived if your paperwork had mattered less than your ambition." I shut my eyes. So that was the wound beneath the nursery. Not abstract loss, not someone he loved. A pregnant sister bleeding while men chose order over urgency. A man does not survive that cleanly. I replaced the vent loosely and sat on the cot with my hands over my stomach, the underwire still bent in my fist like a tiny weapon. When the door opened hours later, it was not Cesare. It was one of Vittorio's guards with a tray of water and bread. He underestimated me because I was pregnant. Men always started there. I waited until he bent to set down the tray. Then I drove the sharpened end of the wire into the soft place just above his collarbone. Not deep enough to kill, deep enough to shock. As he reeled back cursing, I swung the metal chair into his knee. He went down. I took his keys and ran. The corridor outside was narrow, damp, and poorly lit. Underground. The air smelled of brine and old stone. Tunnels under the sea wall, then. I moved as fast as my body allowed, one hand on the rough wall, the other gripping the keys hard enough to cut skin. I made it 3 turns before footsteps thundered behind me, so I did the only thing left. I threw the ring of keys through an open drainage grate and kept running. By the time they caught me, Cesare himself had come, his face stripped of every polite expression he had ever worn in the Salvator house. He looked at the empty key hook on the wall, then at me. For the first time, he seemed to understand that innocence and helplessness were not the same thing. "Bind her hands," he said. They did, but they could not put the keys back in their lock. And now, when Dante came, the house with no windows would not hold as easily. The second day in the underground room taught me the true shape of time. It was not hours, it was sounds, dripping water. Footsteps at irregular intervals. A rusted hinge somewhere far off. Men arguing once in Russian, once in Neapolitan dialect too thick for me to follow. My own heart beat when the baby shifted, and terror surged through me for no reason but helplessness. They tied my hands only when moving me, which told me 2 useful things. First, they still believed the pregnancy made me slower than dangerous. Second, Cesare had not told Vittorio about the vent. The key ring, or the underwire. Shame, perhaps, or a private desire not to admit I had outplayed his precautions. On the 3rd visit, Vittorio Marchese came himself. He was elegant the way old knives are elegant. Gray suit, silver watch, scar along the left side of his mouth that deepened when he smiled. I saw at once what made him a mirror to Dante. Not appearance, gravity. A room bent around him too. But where Dante's stillness held control, Vittorio's held appetite. "You disappoint me," he said pleasantly. "Most women in your condition beg by now. I already tried mercy with one Mafia boss. The first one handled it better." His smile widened. "There he is, inside your answer." I stared back and gave him nothing else. That unsettled him, I think, not much, enough. He crouched to my level. "Do you know what Dante was before grief refined him? Efficient, obedient, like me, only younger. Men loved him then. Easier to guide. And now he hesitates where you are concerned. Vittorio's eyes went briefly to my stomach. That is fatal. Something hot and foolish flared through my fear. Maybe only to men who mistake cruelty for strength. He laughed softly and stood. You sound like his sister, from what I remember. He left me with that knife in my chest. I held on to it until the sound came. Not footsteps, a metallic click. Faint, distant, impossible, a lighter. My whole body went still. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe memory had finally learned to torment me in precise forms. But 30 seconds later, shouting erupted somewhere down the tunnel. Then a gunshot. Then another, closer. The door to my room shuddered on its hinges. Someone outside yelled, "Move her!" Too late. The lock blew inward with the frame. Smoke rolled through first. Then Renzo, gun up. Behind him Nino, pale as flour and cursing in 3 languages. And behind them, Dante. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of me. His hands were on my face, my shoulders, my wrists, checking, counting, confirming. Are you hurt? I shook my head once. Then again because words had left me. His forehead touched mine just briefly. That one contact nearly undid us both. Can you walk? He asked. Yes. Good. He cut the binding at my wrists with a knife that flashed once in the low light. Blood rushed back into my hands in painful needles. I swayed. He caught me instantly. Nino looked away with exaggerated discretion. I would like the record to show, he informed the wall, that I objected to storming an underground tunnel after 3 espressos and no carbohydrates. Renzo shoved a spare pistol into his hand. Complain while moving. I touched Dante's sleeve. Cesare, his eyes changed. I know, he and Vittorio are using Warehouse 12, tied tunnels. Midnight exchange. I know that too. Your sister, I said, because it came out before caution did. Cesare delayed the car. Everything in him went still, not externally. More terrifyingly than that, as if some internal machine had frozen at the exact point of rupture. Who told you? Vittorio. Nino muttered a prayer under his breath. Dante helped me stand. He did not speak for 3 full seconds. When he finally did, his voice had gone quieter than I had ever heard it. We move now. The escape through the tunnels was chaos in sections, running, turning, Renzo firing behind us, salt damp on the walls. Nino nearly slipping into black seawater and swearing eternal revenge on all maritime architecture. But through it all, Dante kept one hand at the small of my back, never pushing, never grabbing, just there, a line of orientation through panic. At one flooded passage, I faltered. The water rose to my knees, freezing. Dante turned immediately. What? I can't. He did not wait for the rest. He lifted me, not with flourish, not as romance, as necessity so intimate it burned. My arms went around his neck because there was nowhere else for them to go. His face was close enough that I could see the pulse jumping once at his throat. Gunfire sounded behind us. He moved through the water as if the weight of me meant nothing. It meant everything. When we emerged into cold night air behind the seawall, I realized I was crying. He set me down carefully. Are you hurt? No. Then why are you crying? The absurdity of that almost made me laugh. You came. His face changed in a way I would remember all my life. As if no one had ever reduced his violence to its truest sentence before. You came. He touched my cheek with 2 fingers, bloody and shaking now that the adrenaline had somewhere to leave him. Little Sparrow, he said, and the name had no coldness left in it at all, not yet warmth either, something rower. Where else? I wanted to answer. To say something equal to what he had done, what I had heard, what I knew now about his sister, and the nursery and the grief that had built him into this man. Instead, I reached for his hand. He let me. Back at the estate, the reunion with the others was a blur of tears, curses, doctor. Rixai examining me under bright light, Maria kissing my forehead hard enough to hurt, Elena turning away suspiciously fast after confirming I was intact. And then Dante vanished into his office with Renzo. I found him there an hour later because sleep was impossible and fear had changed shape into something else entirely. The office lamp burned low. His jacket was gone, His shirt sleeves were rolled. The map of the harbor lay open on the desk. He did not look up when I entered. "You should be resting. You should too. That's less urgent." I crossed the room slowly. "Is it true?" His lighter clicked once in his hand, then shut. He still did not look at me. "Yes," he said. I waited. When he finally lifted his eyes to mine, the breaking point was there, uncovered and merciless. "My sister bled in my car for 27 minutes while I followed protocol." His voice stayed level by force alone. "I listened to my father's men say the clinic was exposed, the route unsafe, the police too close. By the time I ignored them, she was cold. No speech could have hit harder than the simplicity of that. I went to him. He did not move. I put my hand over the scar near his thumb where the lighter rested. It wasn't your fault alone." A bitter shadow passed over his mouth. "No. That's the problem." For one paragraph, his mind opened under the strain of it. Dante had spent years making himself impossible to surprise with pain. Then this woman with tired eyes and a healer's hands had walked out of a cellar and said the one thing no one else ever did after his violence. "You came. Not what did you do. Not what did you become." Just that, he would kill Cesare. He would kill Vittorio. He would burn the tunnels flat. And afterward, if there was anything human left in him worth offering, he would place it in her hands and let her decide whether to keep it. I touched his face before I could think better of it. This time when he kissed me, there was no ambush around us. No blood loss, no smoke, no running. Just a man shaking under stillness, and a woman who had seen enough darkness to stop mistaking restraint for indifference. It was slow, careful, devastating. When he pulled back, his forehead stayed against mine. "One of us may not survive tomorrow," he said. I closed my eyes. "I know." It was the first honest future either of us had spoken aloud. War always sounds larger from a distance. Up close, it is detail. The scrape of a magazine locking in, the smell of diesel under the harbor. Renzo tying a fresh bandage around Nino's ribs, while Nino complained that all meaningful tragedies in his life involved poor timing and unattractive lighting. Maria pressing a tiny silver saint into my palm before dawn and whispering, "Bring him back if God has any manners left." I was not supposed to go to Warehouse 12. Dante made that clear. I made myself clearer. "You need someone who can identify Cesare's ledger codes," I said in the armory room while men checked weapons around us. "Paolo showed me once." He joked that accountants hid sins in initials and shipping weights. Dante turned from the table with a bulletproof vest in his hands. "No, I'm not asking. Then you're wasting both our time." We stared at one another across steel shelves and oilcloth crates. Renz wisely vanished. Nino vanished less wisely, and then reappeared half a second later because he had forgotten his knife, saw our faces, and muttered. "This is how people conceive second children, before fleeing properly." Dante's mouth almost moved. "Almost. You stay at the estate," he said. "I was leverage yesterday." "I'm evidence today." I said no. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low because the men around us deserved not to witness this. If Cesare kept records, they matter. If Vittorio escapes with them, he rebuilds. If you leave me here because you can't bear the risk, that's not strategy. That's fear wearing strategy's coat. His jaw flexed once. "You think I don't know I'm afraid," he said softly. The answer stripped all the air from the room. I swallowed. "Then let me be useful anyway." Long silence. At last he held out the vest. "You do exactly what Renzo says." My pulse stumbled. "Yes. You stay behind me unless I tell you otherwise." "Yes. If I say run, you run even if I don't." That one almost broke me. "Yes." Warehouse 12 crouched over the water like a bad memory. Rusted cranes, wet concrete, gulls shrieking over black tide. The tunnels below took us through brine-dark passages, until we reached the old customs chamber, where Cesare's ledgers were stored in metal lockboxes and Vittorio waited with 6 men, and a smile that knew too much. Cesare stood at his side. For one impossible second, grief crossed his face when he saw me armored and alive beside Dante. Then the chamber erupted. Gunfire in enclosed stone is hell, deafening. Immediate, men fell. Renzo moved like a machine. Nino, to my lasting astonishment, shot one attacker in the shoulder and shouted, "I hate cardio, I hate tunnels. And I especially hate rude old men with imported shoes." Amid the chaos, I found the ledger cabinet because Paolo had once described it while half-drunk and unaware I was truly listening. Third wall, lower shelf, false back panel. I pried it open with numb fingers. Inside lay 2 books and a flash drive taped beneath the shelf. "Dante," Vittorio heard me first. He lunged. I backed away too slowly, boots skidding on seawater. He caught my vest strap and dragged me hard enough to wrench my shoulder. Before he could pull me fully in, I drove Maria's silver saint into the scar at his mouth. He roared. The grip loosened. Dante crossed the distance and hit him with a force so controlled it frightened me more than fury would have. 2 blows, 1 disarm. 1 shot through the side when Vittorio went for the knife at his ankle. Vittorio crashed against a crate, blood spreading dark across gray wool. Cesare did not run. That was his final vanity. He looked at Dante with something like tired affection. "You were brilliant until she made you sentimental." Dante's gun stayed leveled. "You delayed the car." Cesare's eyes flicked to me, then back. I followed the order that protected the family. She was my family. She was a liability. The words landed like a death sentence. I saw in Dante's face the exact point where vengeance stops being abstract. Yet when he spoke, his voice was steady. "No, you were," he shot Cesare once. Cleanly, through the heart, no monologue. No spectacle, just consequence. Vittorio, bleeding against the crate, laughed a little through his teeth. "There, that's the man I remember." Dante turned the gun toward him. "Then remember this," he said. "I chose differently." Vittorio's smile thinned. "Did you?" He looked at me then, at my hand over my stomach, the ledgers clutched to my chest. And for one unstable instant, I thought he saw not victory, but the shape of what Dante had saved himself from becoming. Dante fired. When it was over, the chamber seemed too quiet to trust. Bodies, salt water, shell casings settling. Nino breathing hard against the wall and saying, to no one in particular, "If anyone survives this and serves me plain chicken again, I'm switching families." The ledger pages proved everything. Bribes, routes, shell companies, names of officials, Cesare's signatures, Vittorio's percentages. Enough to dismantle their remaining network and feed selected evidence to police without cutting Dante's own throat open in the process. Victory, then, but not clean. Back at the estate, Maria cried over Nino's torn jacket as if fabric itself had been martyred. Elena lit candles in the chapel. Renzo supervised lock changes. Doctor. Rixai cleaned the bruise forming at my shoulder, while saying nothing about the way my hands shook only after I was safe. Dante stood alone on the terrace at dusk. I found him there because the whole day felt unfinished otherwise. Harbor wind moved his hair. The city below glittered as if men had not bled for it before breakfast. "It is over," I said. He nodded once. I waited. "At a cost," he said. Cesare had raised him in half the ways that mattered to power. Killing him had not looked difficult. I knew enough now to understand that did not mean it was easy. I touched his arm. "You didn't become him." His gaze stayed on the water. I came close enough to know the distance. I leaned into his side carefully. After a moment, he let the weight exist there. Below us, Naples went on with the shamelessness of surviving cities. Above it, the war ended not with triumph, but with 2 people standing still long enough to feel what it had taken. It was over. Peace, I learned, was not silence. Peace was hearing a door close and not wondering who had died. 6 weeks after Warehouse 12, the Salvator house had settled into a new rhythm. Repairs finished. Guard shifts normalized. The newspapers turned their appetite elsewhere. The old schoolroom became mine by habit rather than precaution. Maria resumed terrorizing vendors over tomato quality. Renzo spoke to me in full sentences now, which in his language amounted to affection. Nino recovered enough to make himself unbearable. He appeared in the kitchen one rainy afternoon holding a bunch of basil and a look of tragic resolve. "Today," he announced, "I confess everything." Maria did not turn from the stove. If this is about the missing Parmigiano, I already know. It is about love. Elena, shelling peas at the table, murmured, "Then we'll need wine." I sat nearby with my feet propped on a stool, mending one of Dante's handkerchiefs, where the edge had frayed. The tiny work calmed me, needle in, needle through, cloth learning to hold again. Nino pressed the basil to his chest and faced Maria. "You are cruel, glorious." Entirely too willing to mock a wounded man, yet I remained devoted. Maria turned at last, wooden spoon in hand. "Nino Belandi, if you propose to me with herbs, I'll bury you in the garden," he brightened. "So you've thought about our future." Even Renzo, leaning in the doorway, laughed. The warmth of that room hit me unexpectedly hard, not because it erased anything, because it didn't. Blood had been scrubbed from these floors, lies had walked these corridors. Yet here was Maria trying not to smile, Elena pretending not to smile at Maria, Nino basking in his own absurd courage. And me with a child moving under my heart, while ordinary life insisted on returning in pieces. That was the radical thing, not safety. Continuance. Dante found me there at dusk after the others drifted away. He stood in the kitchen doorway watching me fold the repaired handkerchief. The room smelled of basil, bread, and the lemon polish Maria used on the old table. He had loosened his tie. Fatigue shadowed him, but lighter now, less like armor, more like use. "You fixed it." I looked down at the cloth in my hands. It was a small tear. He came closer. "You say that about many things." I set the handkerchief aside before my fingers gave away too much. "And you say very little about the things that aren't." His gaze held mine. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small velvet box on the kitchen table between us. My heart did something painful. "No," I said immediately, because fairy tales and I had never been introduced properly. "No," he agreed, which startled me enough to look up. "Not like that." He opened the box. Inside lay a ring, not enormous, not ostentatious, a square emerald held by plain old gold. Elegant in the way restraint can be elegant when it has nothing left to prove. "It was my mother's," he said. "My father gave it to her after his first prison sentence, which is not remotely romantic and would offend you if I pretended otherwise." Despite myself, I smiled. He continued. "I am not asking for a fairy tale. I don't own one to offer." The room became very still. "I am asking whether you will choose this house with me in it," he said. "Not as a guest, not as leverage. Not because my child is under your heart, though God knows that matters. I am asking because every room changes when you're in it, and because I have reached the embarrassing age of understanding, I would rather be feared by the city than pitied by you." My throat ached. That was the closest thing to a speech he had ever given me, and it mattered precisely because he was a man who usually spent words like gold. I looked at the ring. At his hand beside the box, scar near the thumb, fingers utterly still. At the kitchen table where Maria kneaded dough and Nino staged tragedies, and Elena judged everyone alive. At the life waiting just beyond this moment, not clean, never clean, but chosen. "I need one truth first," I whispered. "You have it. If there are more shadows left in your world, do not protect me from them with lies." His face changed. "No lies, no beautiful omissions either." A shadow of rough amusement crossed his mouth. "That condition feels targeted." "It is," he nodded once. "Agreed." I exhaled shakily. "Then yes." The word seemed to travel through him like impact. He took the ring out of the box, but did not put it on immediately. Instead, he looked at me as if asking one last permission without language. I held out my hand. His fingers slid the ring into place slowly. The fit was exact. That almost undid me more than anything else. "You planned for confidence," I said. "I planned for hope." He lifted my hand and pressed his mouth to the ring once. "They are not identical." The tenderness of that nearly sent me into tears, so I did the only safe thing. I laughed. He looked startled. "What? You proposed to me in a kitchen. It's the room where you look least likely to run. That is not flattering. It wasn't meant to be." Then he touched my cheek. Thumb resting there with quiet familiarity, and the room tipped warm around the edges. Little sparrow, he said. Nothing cold remained in the name now. No observation. No possession sharpened into warning. Only home, somehow, against every law I had once imagined for myself. I leaned into his hand, because pretending otherwise had grown childish. From the hallway, Nino's voice floated in mournfully. Maria says if I steal one more olive, she'll call off our engagement. Maria shouted back. There is no engagement. There is in my spirit. Dante closed his eyes briefly. I laughed against his palm. After war, this was what came, not absolution. A kitchen, a ring, basil on the table, ridiculous voices beyond the door. The terrifying softness of being wanted in a world that had once only asked me to survive it. When he kissed me then, it was gentle enough to feel almost ordinary. That was how I knew it was real. 9 months after the nursery, the house woke before dawn to boiling water, clean sheets, and Nino praying at full volume in the corridor despite having been told repeatedly he was not helping. I am helping spiritually, he insisted through the door. You are panicking theatrically, Maria snapped. There's a difference. No one has located it. I was in labor in the old schoolroom because in the final month I had refused hospitals and doctor. Rixai, after 3 lectures and 1 prolonged glare from Dante, had surrendered to the inevitable on the condition that he control the room like a field operation. Elena heated towels. Maria bullied everyone with saintly ferocity. Renzo guarded the hall as if assassins might emerge from the wallpaper. Dante stood by the window being more frightening in silence than the pain was in speech. That last part was almost impressive. Between contractions, I watched him pace exactly 3 steps and stop, 3 steps and stop, like a man trying to negotiate with fate using geometry. Sit down, I gasped. I am fine, doctor. Rixai at the foot of the bed muttered, he is the least fine person here. Even in pain, I nearly smiled. Hours passed in heat and effort, and the kind of vulnerability that strips vanity from the body. I had spent so much of the year trying not to break in front of men. There was no room for that now. Only breath, pressure, Maria's cool cloth at my neck, Elena's hand gripping mine harder than she would later admit, Dante going white when Dr. Rixai asked for more towels. At one point, he moved beside the bed and took my hand, not because I asked, because he could no longer bear not to. His silver lighter sat in his other hand, closed, thumb rubbing the engraved lid again and again without opening it. The old nervous rhythm, the sound that had started all of this. Dante, I said through clenched teeth. He bent at once. I'm here. I looked at the lighter, then at him. You'll wear the metal smooth. A shocked, helpless laugh left him. There, human again. Another contraction tore through me. I gripped his hand so hard I should have apologized and did not. He let me bruise him without a word. Adriana, he said later, when the room narrowed to the final brutal work of it. Look at me. I did. That saved me more than breath patterns ever could. At sunrise, our daughter entered the world furious, red-faced, and loud enough to rebuke heaven. For one suspended beat, no one moved. Then she cried again, and the whole room exhaled. Maria wept openly. Elena turned away and pretended to rearrange linens with murderous composure. Nino shouted, a girl, excellent. She'll terrify us all properly. Renzo from the doorway crossed himself. Dr. Rixai laid her on my chest. I had thought love might arrive gently. It did not. It arrived like injury, like mercy. Like a door kicked open in the center of me. Dante stood frozen beside the bed. I had seen him over bodies, in tunnels, with gunsmoke in his hair and blood on his hands. I had seen him kill the men who would have used us. I had seen him hold his own grief like a blade turned inward. I had never seen him look afraid to touch something. Come here, I whispered. He did. Very slowly, he held one finger near our daughter's curled fist. She grabbed it immediately with shocking authority. His face broke, not dramatically, no tears. Nothing anyone outside our bed would have recognized, but I saw it, the crack all the same, the exact place where terror became devotion too large to hide. She has your grip, I said. She has your refusal to let go. That too was love. By afternoon the house quieted, Visitors were refused. Food arrived and vanished untouched. Our daughter slept in the cradle doctor. Rixai swore was temporary, and Alina swore was not good enough until Maria threw a pillow at both of them. Near sunset, when the room finally emptied, Dante came back carrying a folded bundle. "What's that?" He set it beside me, the christening blanket, the one I had mended. The tear was still there if one knew where to look, but held, strong, honest. I touched the seam with one fingertip. "You kept it. I keep more than you think." He laid the blanket over our daughter with reverence that said more than any vow. Then the lighter clicked, open this time, not lit. Just opened and shut again between his fingers, the same sound as the first night. The same metallic note that had once meant danger standing in a nursery doorway while I begged for mercy and tried not to shake. Now it sounded like awe searching for a form. He looked at me across the cradle. "Do you know what I noticed first about you?" I smiled faintly. "That I trespassed? That too." He came closer, lowered himself to the chair by the bed, and took my hand. "But first, I noticed you begged once, told the truth, and then went quiet. As if you had decided fear didn't deserve extra words." I felt the year fold in on itself. "In the end," he said, voice low, "you still do it. Every time something matters most, you go still. And it still lands the same." I looked at our daughter sleeping between us. "What does it cost you now?" He answered without hesitation. "Everything I would have been without you." There are no safe replies to sentences like that. So I squeezed his hand and let silence do what it had done from the beginning, tell the truth more cleanly than speech. Outside the windows, Naples darkened into evening. Somewhere in the kitchen, Nino argued that becoming godfather should come with access to better wine. Maria told him he'd be lucky to touch the good olives. Ordinary sounds, radical sounds. A life built not from forgetting, but from continuing anyway. Dante leaned over the cradle and brushed one knuckle down our daughter's cheek, then mine. "Rest, little sparrow." The name settled warm in every place it had once bruised. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened to the room, the baby's tiny breaths, distant voices downstairs, the house holding. We had closed every door blood had opened. And still one thread remained, not of danger but of conscience. How much darkness a life may ask you to accept in exchange for the one person who makes it feel bearable. So tell me this, would you have chosen Dante and let blood be the price of peace?